Tell us a little bit more. So, I mean, are you a pharmacy nerd where you're kind of getting down into depths with the organic chemistry of the herbs and trying to figure out, okay, how does this mechanistically happen,
Yeah,
and what's
yeah.
the reaction that happens in the body and the gut to lead to this and that and the other? Or are you kind of taking like the rest of us infidels and we just kind of accept it and keep going?
Like at first I was like that because I'm one of those people, like I will literally pull a radio apart and look at every part in it and then put it all back together so I can know how it functions and works. And so that was my approach initially. But what I discovered along the journey is that although we're taught here in the US and even other places how to use herbs in the same ways that we use drugs, they don't work that way. And in many cases, they work synergistically. Many cases, they work spiritually. Many cases, people are looking for an herb to take care of a symptom. And when you use herbs like that, in my opinion, you're misusing them because you're not using the whole purpose of the herb. And so what I've gone into these last couple of years is really trying to expand my knowledge in terms of like how to even use herbs holistically, because people think just because you use herbs, that's a holistic approach. But it's become even
You're gonna have to explain that because now
I
you
know
got
it's
me now you
become,
got me in a mental bender.
yeah,
I'm
so
sitting here
like,
like, huh?
I'll try to explain. So let me give you an example. So part of one of my products is my detox, right?
Okay.
And so I had somebody, I just did like a 14-day challenge with like a group of people, like 300 people. And when we were in there, we had a nurse practitioner who was in there. And she was really concerned because one of my herbal blends has center in it. And we were doing it for 14 days, 28 days, what have you. And so what I was trying to explain to her was, well, what you're looking at is just the center. I was like, but this is a herbal blend. There's 7 herbs inside of there. And so what I do is first of all, you can change the ratio to make sure everything is going to be fine. But also you have to understand I added other herbs in there to reduce or blunt the effect that center would have. So I add in something like a marshmallow and a slippery elm, because when you actually add them into water, you'll notice that they'll actually create a gel, with those 2 herbs. And that gel will lubricate the digestive tract. Okay. That's not only going to help with inflammation that's in the gut, which a lot of patients have anyway, but it's also going to blunt out some of the effect of the center as well. And so that's what I mean by that. It's kind of difficult to explain because I really haven't necessarily like flushed out the philosophy for myself, but I understand it myself. And as Einstein would say, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you
Exactly.
don't know it yet. So I'm still in the phase where I'm really developing that, but I do know it mechanistically for myself. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So okay, so then tell there's a lot of people out there listening, and I get different things who may say, well, what's a detox? Or why do I need to do a detox, doc, if I'm whole food plant-based right now?
Gotcha. So with me coming from a chemistry background, one of my first jobs, even before pharmacy school, was I worked in a food plant as a food chemist.
Hmm.
And so I got to understand food chemistry very intimately. And in that understanding, I understand how we bake addiction into a lot of foods. I also understand how unhealthy foods are. Like when people hear this food is fortified with this, they think, oh, good, it has fiber in it. It's fortified with fiber. It's fortified with B vitamins, etc. But what they never think about was, why has it been fortified with that? Because they're thinking like fortified means they added more. But what fortified means is the processing of the food removed everything good. All the fiber, all the vitamins, all the minerals. There's nothing left. The fortified is putting something into it that doesn't exist at that moment. And what's important for people to know, especially with processed foods, is the fortifying that they're doing to it is things that are synthetics. These things don't come from nature. So they're not natural B vitamins. They're not natural fiber. You understand? And so learning that was instrumental for me, because once I learned that, it was like, okay, so 70% of the standard American diet is processed foods. We're literally loading ourselves with toxins every day. I mean, you look at the label, at least 50% of it is like chemistry. I mean, there's nothing you could pronounce in it. I mean, if it's strawberry park tox, strawberry is not in the ingredients. And nobody really thinks about that. It may say strawberry flavor, but that is not strawberry.
No.
And so that's the number one reason you should be concerned about toxins. The second reason is there was a study by the EWG, which is the Environmental Work Group, and they did a test on adults, and they also did a test on infants to see the toxicity level. I think it was called the body burden of toxicity in adults and children. And what they discovered, and they did a fat sample, because fat is where toxicity hides out. And so they did a fat sample. And when they did that fat sample, they found over 190 toxins in the human body. Now, you would think to yourself, well, this baby just came into the world, so no way the baby has more toxins. The babies actually had more toxins than the adults. And it makes sense, because the baby's coming in to the world through the mother. And so when you create that placenta, she's pouring in the nutrition to the baby. And babies are mostly water and fat anyway. So it makes sense they're going to have a lot of toxicity. Okay. And so that's the second reason why you have to understand that. The third reason, and I learned this through my travels, is the food here in the US is very different than food anywhere else. Much of the food in the US isn't allowed in other countries. For example, a bag of Lay's chips that you get here versus you get in the UK, the ingredients are totally different, because there's over 10,000 chemicals that are allowed in our food supply that aren't allowed in Europe, Asia, and pretty much nowhere else. That's why when people go and they say, hey, can I get a Mexican Coke? They're asking for a Mexican Coke because Mexico will not allow high fructose corn syrup in their supply. And so it's really important to understand, people look at high fructose corn syrup as a sugar, but it's really a toxin. It will cause you to have diabetes, obesity, et cetera, et cetera. And so toxicity becomes important for those three reasons, but also the air is more polluted. The water is more polluted. The things that we put on our bodies and our cosmetic and hygienic products, we're getting toxicity at a level that our grandparents never experienced. And as a result, it becomes very important to understand that, yes, we have organs of detoxification like our liver and our kidneys, but they become burdened and oversaturated, and they don't work as well. This is why hepatic and liver disease is through the roof now. This is why so many people have fatty liver disease. This is why in our neighborhoods, dialysis clinics are almost as prevalent as McDonald's now.
Absolutely.
And so as a result, it becomes very important to get some sort of routine with cleansing and detoxifying the body.
Yes. So speaking of like our neighborhoods, what's been your approach to kind of move people inside of disparate communities, proud individuals who are loving individuals, who are good people, but maybe have adopted circumstantial habits due to life circumstances? How do you really address them and get them moving towards it? And what do you do once you get past the detox? Tell us about the program that you institute once a person gets beyond that detox of 2 weeks or 21 days. And then what do you recommend for them in terms of transitioning?
At that point, it's really about self-care. Like, you really have to learn how to value health. And that's what I'm finding in our society in general, but especially in our communities. We don't value health in the way that we need to. And so one of the most common phrases that I get is, you got to die of something, doc.
Yeah, exactly.
And yes, you got to die of something. I agree with that. But you don't have to die of diabetes. You don't have to die of a stroke. You don't have to die of a heart attack. These are all preventable conditions. And so my thing is getting them to value their health and prioritize their health. And the only way I can do that, especially, and it depends on the population, because if it's an elderly population, what I always try to do is help them remember what it was like 50 years ago. Because if they can remember what it was like 50 years ago, they will know that things are different today. They will know that 90% of the food products in the supermarket today didn't exist in the 1950s. Okay, so you're eating food that didn't exist 50 years ago. And if I can get them to conceptualize that and say, damn, that is real. And then when I say, you know what, 50, 60 years ago, a refrigerator wasn't even popular. Like it was just coming into the homes. So most people, when they got food, they got it fresh. We are not getting fresh food. Okay. Most of our foods are coming out of box, bags, cans, jars, etc. Okay. And then I tell them, well, if you had to go get meat, there were no like supermarkets. You went to go get meat, you had to go to a butcher. And it was expensive. Like it wasn't like today's subsidized meat. You had to pay a fair wage for meat back then. So most people actually ate plant-based Monday through Saturday, plant-based. And on Sunday, they would sort of have a celebratory meal and have that big meal on Sunday. So our great-grandparents were eating primarily a plant-based diet, the same way the Okinawans were.
Yeah, I mean, that's the standard American dream, right?